Since the last bracket on Tuesday, Purdue remains a 2 seed. Wisconsin now up 1 spot to a 3 seed. Ohio State moving up a seed line after that win at Illinois last night, while the Illini fall from a 3 to a 4. Iowa moved up 2 lines to a 7 seed. Michigan is now in the bracket after beating Rutgers. They were among the first 4 out in the previous iteration. Rutgers now among the last 4 in. Indiana still on the outside looking in. Mike joining us for his weekly visit. And Mike, I always find the bubble to be the most interesting spot. So let's start there. Michigan moved in with that win over Rutgers. They have 4 games left. For a while, we were saying all 4 of them were quad 1s. Technically, right now, I think Michigan State would be a quad 2. I looked at the net this morning. They are 36. Top 35 is a quad 1 at home. We're splitting hairs here. It's still a challenging game. I know you still have the Big Ten tournament to factor in, so there's no hard and fast numbers, and this isn't in a vacuum. You have all kinds of other stuff going on. But what do you think Michigan would need to do to feel comfortable in these last 4 games?
I think the way to feel comfort is to win at home. This is the first time Michigan has appeared in one of my brackets this season. I've been doing them since the last week of December, and I never felt there was enough there to put them in. I thought they needed to get more done. And the win the other night was huge because it was a head-to-head kind of battle against another bubble team. And I think there's a little bit of an element of they should get in now in their being here on the bracket with the 3 home games coming up, all of them high-quality opportunities. I just think there's a chance for them to get it done, and I think that this team has a rhythm going to it. I thought the way they played Rutgers showed that they're ready to take on the challenge.
Speaking of Rutgers, that win over Rutgers, as you said, moved the Wolverines up. You know how I feel about Rutgers. They are in 5th place. If you were to take the top 8 teams in the Big Ten other than themselves, so the other 7 teams in the top 8, they've beaten every single one of them. Every single one of them. They have 5 quad 1 wins. There are only 13 teams in the country that have more. I'm going to beat this drum until I break the skin of it, right? They deserve to be in from where I sit. But I know that you do it differently. You do it the way the committee does it. And again, don't shoot the messenger. I get all that stuff. You're just trying to replicate their process. But give me a sense of where Rutgers stands right now.
They stand as like my biggest headache, Dave. I like Pike so much. He is such a good guy. We've covered these players for 3 to 5 years. They're wonderful. They're a wonderful team. But goodness gracious, if they could have just beaten Lafayette, we could all relax and get this done. They have games. I think the Wisconsin game, the opportunity to sweep Wisconsin, I don't see how you leave them out if they can get that done. And, of course, obviously you have to close out with a victory at home against Penn State. They have the road win that they needed to show that it's not just a rack deal. They'll have the opportunity to do some neutral things in the Big Ten tournament here in Indy. I think that it certainly Indiana would also, if they couldn't get the Wisconsin sweep, going out and getting Indiana would have double value. It would eliminate some of the competition. It would give them more road achievement. Either one of those next 2 would be enormous for the Scarlet Knights. But I think the Wisconsin win would resonate with more value, even though it's at home.
Again, 5 quad 1s, just by means of comparison. Houston has none. North Carolina's got 1. Wake Forest has 1. I mean, I know you know all this stuff, but just for the viewers, right? I mean, it really is remarkable. It's one of the most unusual resumes I think we have ever seen. So you mentioned Indiana, right, in that Indiana-Rutgers game. So for Indiana, would beating Rutgers at home be enough to then put them into the bracket? They go to Purdue also. Obviously, that would be enormous because then they'd have a sweep of Purdue. But how big is that Rutgers game for them?
Well, it is big, but don't forget they have to go to Minnesota. And Minnesota came within 1 point of beating a potential conference champion just 2 nights ago.
Yep.
So they have to get that done. If they lose on the road at Minnesota, I mean, obviously Minnesota's played very well at the Barn, and they are tough and well coached and together, and they haven't given up, which is huge. But that doesn't all factor in. I mean, there's nobody in New York sitting in the selection room saying, yeah, but Minnesota was really trying hard then. So I think that they have to get that done. And then the Rutgers game becomes enormous, because if you don't get it, then you go into Purdue kind of realizing that it's either this or it's win a few in Indianapolis. And I don't think they want to be in that position. So they have to take care of business at Minnesota, and then the Rutgers game becomes pivotal.
Yeah, the Minnesota game feels a lot like the Maryland game was for them last night. It's just a game you can't afford to lose. It's not going to get you in, but losing it might go a long way toward keeping you out. Michigan State, you still have them very solidly in, Mike, but they've lost 5 of their last 6 games. The schedule down the stretch here is brutal. They are not playing well. Are they in any jeopardy here of missing the tournament?
No chance. I mean, lose 5 in a row, and I don't think that's going to happen, but lose the remaining 4 plus 1 in Indy but that seems highly unlikely. And obviously the schedule is very tough. It comes down to they're an elite team, an elite program. We're expected to be an elite team. The schedule gets backloaded because that's when people are paying attention. And I guess if you want to lighten the load a little bit, it's to their advantage that Maryland, which was projected to be a top team, has had a difficult season. So at least in that final game, they can maybe work out some of the problems. But I think some of the problems have to be worked out prior to that if they want to be successful if they get at least a couple of these Final Four. I think that they can feel pretty comfortable that they'll stay above the 8-9 line. If they continue to lose, Michigan State becomes the ideal 8-9 team. But look, the committee loves teams like Michigan State to be in a spot like that. They look at them and they say, great name, they belong in the field. Right now they can't beat anybody, so they're not beating our one. And so Michigan State has to start to get back onto where they can achieve, get their offensive rhythm back, get their confidence back, and they can stay out of that game. That's the last place, other than outside the field, that's the last place any team wants to be.
Well, thankfully for them, they beat Loyola and UConn. I mean, those wins are really resonating now. And again, they happened, it was Thanksgiving week, but I mean, to win those games, enormous for Michigan State. Let's go to the top of the Big Ten. You had Purdue as a 2 seed. Do they have any chance of getting to that one line? Where do they rank among your 2s?
Oh, among the 2s, they are the 3rd in line. So they would be the 7th team overall at this point. And so do they have a chance? Well, one of the interesting things about that is, and it happens on Saturday, Kansas plays Baylor. So one of those teams that's basically 4 and 5 right now, one of those teams is taking a hit. And I would suspect that if Baylor were to beat Kansas, they'd replace KU on the one line. If KU were to win, they'd be more affirmed there. But there's still other losses out there for both of them. Big 12 is a very deep league. Arizona is a team that certainly has the capacity to lose, but there's not much out there to challenge them. I think they still have a makeup game against Southern California that might be losable. And then Auburn is the team, I think, if you're Purdue, you're circling Auburn and rooting for everybody they play because Auburn has wobbled a bit. They still have to go to Tennessee. They go to Mississippi State, and you say, yeah, Mississippi State hasn't beaten anybody in a month. But this is a team in Auburn that struggled at Mizzou, which is near the bottom of the league. They lost at Arkansas when Arkansas wasn't fully established yet. So Auburn on the road could still potentially drop a couple. That's what a Boiler fan would want.
And, of course, Purdue still has that game against Wisconsin, as we showed you, a chance to reinforce their resume. Were they able to pull it out? What about the Badgers? And that, of course, huge game at the top of the league as well. Now we're talking about the 2 teams at the very top of the Big Ten. But what is Wisconsin's seed ceiling? Can they get up to the 2 line? Were they to win the Big Ten, maybe win the Big Ten tournament?
Well, first of all, remember, as we know, winning the Big Ten tournament would not be of any consequence in
Good
seeding,
point. Yep.
unless they were in a circumstance where it was an either or, Purdue or them, that they might be able to build a bracket, an alternate bracket, such as that. That would be the only scenario in which that game would matter.
And just to clarify for people, that's because of how close to the end of the Big Ten tournament the bracket comes out, right? And the committee has basically said they can't really factor it in.
Yeah, they'll like I said, they'll sometimes build alternative brackets. And why would they need to build an alternative bracket if you can just plug Wisconsin or Purdue, say, in that? Yep. Let's say they're playing for the title in Indy. Why couldn't you do it? Well, sometimes there are rematch problems and that sort of thing, site problems, where you put teams. So they might have trouble building that. But if they have enough time, they might put, and that was the scenario, they might put them in a circumstance where they could get to it too. I really think with what the bracket reveal said 6 days ago was that the metrics are really valued. The Ken Palm net. When I say metrics, I always think of the predictive metrics first. The resume metrics like Kevin Pauga's KPI and strength of record, it was pretty clear they were lower on the priority list for this committee. It's in that circumstance, it's all done by silent ballot. There was no need for them to look at Wisconsin relative to, say, Tennessee, which had a poor quad 1 record for a 3 seed, but some really high level wins. So they never got compared to them, and they might in the committee room down the road. But it looks to me like they're trying to keep a 3 seed, and there's a huge advantage to being a 3. One, it puts them higher on the list to get to Milwaukee, and that's certainly where they want to begin the tournament. And secondly, it keeps you out of a game against the 1 in the Sweet 16 if you're fortunate enough to be there. So there's still a lot to play for, in addition to obviously a Big Ten championship, which means so much.
Does indeed. Mike Decourcy, great stuff as always. We'll look forward to seeing you on the network here this weekend. And man, we are coming down to crunch time, huh? Just over 2 weeks until we do this for real. Mike Decourcy, great stuff. Fred Hoiberg will return as Nebraska's head coach next season. Huskers athletic director Trev Alberts made the announcement yesterday. In a statement, Alberts said Hoiberg has agreed to restructure his contract and has presented a plan to move forward. Nebraska 1-15 in the Big Ten this season, has lost 20 games in each of Hoiberg's 3 seasons at the helm. And Trey, just to provide a little perspective, they had never lost 20 in a season prior to that. So it's happened 3 years in a row. Look, Fred Hoiberg can coach. We know that. I mean, he made the NCAA tournament his last 4 years at Iowa State, had some really good teams. This has not worked out, though, to this point, very clearly. How can he turn things around?
Well, it's all about building for the future. And it starts with the upcoming recruiting class, something that they're very excited about, the 34th ranked recruiting class in the country. You have a point guard coming in from Sierra Canyon that plays with Bronny James. You have the #1 JUCO transfer coming in as well. So there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Huskers fan. And we talk a lot about Matt Painter's bag of plays. Like, Fred Hoiberg has a bag of plays. It's a fun brand of basketball because he can get you open shots. But the one thing I would like to see Fred Hoiberg do more, and I think he's done a better job of this through the course of the season, is holding guys accountable. Like, when guys make mistakes on the defensive end, or if guys are not playing hard, get them out of the game. You want to build that culture. I think he's done that more as of late, and he'll have to continue to do that to turn this thing around.
Yeah, I saw them in person on Tuesday night, and you're right. I mean, it just feels like it's a little loose, and there just didn't seem to be. Guys just didn't feel dialed in, right? Yeah. I mean, they were playing a Northwestern team who had humiliated them early in the season, and Fred was telling me, I challenged them and said, hey, if you've got an ounce of competitiveness in you, this is a game where you show up, and they just didn't. I mean, never led in the game. They're 6-49 now in conference play under Hoiberg, so we'll see. Again, really good coach, but for whatever reason, it was a total rebuild. I mean, they had literally nothing, right? They had Thor Bjarnason, and that was it.
Right.
And then had to kind of figure it out, and it's been some fits and starts, and Delano Banton going pro when they didn't expect him to. I think it's been a big part of it, but we'll see. Easy guy to root for, no doubt. Let's dive into this weekend. A few games you have your eye on, starting with Purdue and Michigan State. What stands out here?
I think Michigan State scoring. And their defense as well. I think 19 points from their starters last game, that's just unacceptable. You can't win many games if you're not getting over 20 points from your starters. Yeah. But I think one of the things, I think Tom Izzo has to find ways to utilize Max Christie and Gabe Brown differently. Because what they're doing right now is just not working. I like them coming off of dribble handoffs, getting them out in movement. Because right now, I think the ball is sticking a little bit too much with A.J. Hoiberg and Tyson Walker. I mean, a lot of their offensive sets end with them in a high ball screen situation. So it's a little bit predictable. I would like to see them get the ball in their wings' hands, maybe get them out in movement a little bit. And then also on the defensive end, like when I think about Michigan State basketball, I think about Tom Izzo, obviously, and just his identity and what he brings to the table just from a personality standpoint. And, you know, one of the things, too, is like there has been so many times where guys have started off hot and they just continue to have a great game. You know, you think about Johnny Davis has 25, Seth Lundy has 17, Keegan Murray has 28. Like when I played, there was, like, if a guy got hot, I remember I played against Michigan State, I got hot. And then all of a sudden, Denzel Valentine's just like, you know what, that's it. No more for Trey Demps. And I remember a specific game, I believe my junior year, where I didn't score the rest of the game. I think I had like 12 points, and then I didn't score the rest of the game. And so, you know, you just don't see that on a consistent basis from Michigan State. Like, guys come in thinking like, hey, you know, I can get off. And then obviously you're going up against Jaden Ivey this game, who's one of the most prolific players in all of college basketball. So I think that's something to watch for. Is there a guy that can just step up and say, you know what, maybe I'm not scoring, but I'm going to stop him?
And also going up against a rested team. Matt Painter was telling me when I had their game about a week ago, they had played 23 straight days, or played or practiced 23 straight days without a day off. They've had 6 days since their last game. So Purdue rested and really good. Wisconsin and Rutgers is a fascinating game to me. Wisconsin's playing for first place in the league. Rutgers is playing to solidify that NCAA tourney standing. Rutgers won in Madison earlier this year. What does Wisconsin need to do to return the favor?
I think they have to make shots. Their last game, they shot 2 of 15, their guard shot 2 of 15 from 3. And Rutgers is a very good transition team. When they get stops and can get out in transition and score some easy baskets, that's when they're the most successful. And I think from Rutgers, I think big picture, I've said this all year, I think they're a bottom 4 team when they're not playing Rutgers basketball, and I think they're a top 25 team when they are playing Rutgers basketball. Gritty, tough. I thought the last 2 games, they kind of got into this kind of coolness, like an NBA type of style where it's your turn, my turn basketball. You know, not being just as assertive and aggressive and, you know, really playing Steve Pikiell basketball. And I think because of that, you see them in the middle, right? You know, they're kind of a bubble team right now. But when they are playing Rutgers basketball, they're getting out in transition, they're being physical, they're being locked in on the defensive end. I think, honestly, they're a top 25 basketball team, so that's what I'm looking for.
They have a tendency to do that at home, so that would bode well because they've been phenomenal, as we know, at Jersey Mike's. Illinois and Michigan, they played last month. The Illini pulled away in the second half. It was actually a little bit closer game than the final score indicated. And remember, Hunter Dickinson did not play in that game. So now they play in Ann Arbor. Illini reeling a little bit coming off of last night. Michigan, as Mike Decourcy outlined, really needs quality wins like this. What are you watching?
There's only one player I'm watching. It's Caleb Houston. And I think big picture here, I just wonder if, you know, playing for Juwan Howard, obviously an NBA legend, you know, you're a 5-star recruit. There's so much expectations on you, you know, and in the first game, Juwan Howard's there. He just looked free. You know, it just looked like he wasn't thinking, he wasn't overthinking, he was just making plays, being aggressive. And he did it against one of the best defenders in the conference, in Caleb McConnell. And then, so this weekend, he's going up against maybe the second best defender in Trent Frazier and obviously Devontae Williams. So that's the one player, because if they can get him going, along with Eli Brooks, Devontae Jones, and you know what you're going to get from Hunter Dickinson, they could be an offensive juggernaut. Really
interesting game. Second of 4 straight home games for the Wolverines, the last road game of the year for the Fighting Illini.